I'm about to have a privileged conversation with a Western-born guru of Vedic wisdom. I'm going to get some answers from him as to how all this incredible wisdom can help us to be more successful and fulfilled in our crazy daily lives. He's the author of several insightful books, including Karma, A Guide to Cause and Effect, and Life Without Fear. His name is Jeffrey Armstrong, and he's the founder of the Vedic Academy of Sciences and Arts. Those of you who are students of self-development know only too well just how important being specific and accurate with language is. Not just speaking and communicating, but especially for being able to articulate ideas and concepts so that they're understood and received exactly as they're intended. So how is this possible when you get a highly sophisticated language like Sanskrit that just doesn't have the equivalent English words or even concepts that are close to their Sanskrit original? My special guest today has given the last 9 years of his life specifically in this context. He's been working to solve exactly this problem in his new translation from Sanskrit to English of the Bhagavad Gita. And I'm excited to be one of the first people to have a conversation with him about his groundbreaking work and many other topics.
Namaskar, Smita. Wonderful to see you.
Yes, you too. Such a long-awaited conversation this, you have to know. I wanted to reach out to you sometime last year, and it just for one reason or another didn't work out. And again, recently we tried to have a conversation. It didn't work out then either, so I'm so excited we can do this today.
Well, it's a yogic secret. Separation makes the heart grow fonder.
It's true.
It's an English saying as well, but in yoga, it's our longing for the divine is the highest state of bliss.
Yes, wonderful. So, I have been following your work for a while, and I'm so touched, actually. It's probably the best way I can put it. I'm really touched by your perspectives and how you bring about an explanation of a very, very deep teaching or a set of teachings in a way that are just like a joy to receive. And it's not always easy with things that are originally written or spoken in Sanskrit. And I really wanted to talk to you about a number of your books and work. I mean, I've got this book here. You're going to see this the other way around. This one is called Spiritual Teachings of the Avatar, and I have been reading it. I was in Japan. I was traveling to Japan last week, and on the flight and in between, I've just been reading bits and pieces. And you can see that I've made marks and notes all across my pages.
The highest compliment is if you write on it.
Sorry?
The highest compliment is if you write on it.
Well, there is like golden gems all over the place. And there's like, for me, it's a real affirmation of my own understanding and perspective in many cases. And in other times, I really love the way that you express yourself. So you might find me quoting you from time to time. I hope you don't mind. And then
I'm just quoting the great Rishi, so it's a natural thing.
The other book is called Karma, A Guide to Cause and Effect. And again, in that one, there is a number of pages that are really interesting to me as well. And I'm keeping it open because if we have time, I'd like to address a couple of the things that you mentioned in there. I'd like to begin, though, with something that is really extraordinary that you're doing. And you've been working on this project for the last 10 years, you've told me. So this book is about to come out next year, and it's your translation of the Bhagavad Gita, and you call it Bhagavad Gita Comes Alive, Timeless Wisdom for a Modern World. It's a major undertaking. I'd really like you to tell people as to why have you undertaken another translation, as in like it's your first one, but there are many out there. So what's different about yours and what led you to this project?
Coming from the outside to the inside was the first part. When you come from outside a culture entirely, you have no prejudices or original ideas. And at the time that I started looking for the truth and finally discovered the knowledge that was present in Bharat, in India, I didn't have any prejudices, but I was an English major and a poet and a literate sort of person. So words were already what made me the most excited. I started writing poetry when I was 13, just automatically, just poured out of me. So, of course, we all know, who think about it, that we're resuming a previous life. So as I resumed that, as I encountered the knowledge of the Vedas and the attempts to bring it into English, my first guru used me to help him translate his books. He actually used my literacy in English to help. So this started me on a process that has continued ever since. That's 50 years ago. So ever since, I have been trying to find what was keeping the knowledge from the Sanskrit words and the meaning from landing in English. And so that became my passion in a way, my hunger to find the just right word or combination of words that would do justice to the meaning of the Sanskrit word.
It's a really interesting thing, because, as you know, when you speak different languages, and especially when the languages that in question are not necessarily close to each other culturally, it's really tricky at times to convey exactly what you mean. And I often wondered about the translations from how I understand them, you know, because we feel our way into some of these texts. You know, we kind of, when you're born into the culture, sort of surrounded by you know, you're surrounded inside of the culture itself. So the way that we do things, the way we say things, the way we, for example, the word bhava, you know, it's very, very difficult to translate into English. You know, the best I've come, people say it's like an inner feeling and all of that, but it has, again, so many different meanings too. So, you know, trying to communicate this, I'm completely on the page with you. And I think this is a really brave and actually a pioneering thing that you're doing. I'd love to read that version of the Gita.
Well, you know, one of my jokes is that after, I mean, it's a joke and not a joke, but after the British went to India and took everything they could for as long as they could and totally impoverished a culture that was brilliant and wealthy beyond imagination when they got there, when they finished and had to leave and left behind this culture that was now trying to recover, just at that moment, the Western world went into rebellion, and the youth, I was one of them then, looked at our elders, and it was the war in Vietnam that really signaled that they were all insane. A war that maybe we had to fight was believable, but a war against jungles and women and children and innocents was insane. So we lost confidence in our elders in a way that was unprecedented for Western civilization, unprecedented. And so what happened next was the gurus and rishis of India all came to the West and said, here, you took everything else, but you forgot the good stuff. This is the good stuff. That's just wealth. This is vidya. This is great wisdom that will enlighten you and awaken you. And I just happened to be standing at the front of the line when that happened. So for me, the magic of it was all I saw. I didn't have any bad habits with it. I wasn't abused by it, by a caste Brahmin. I didn't have difficult things that I had to go through around that knowledge, no trauma. So for me, it was just this wonderful food, this wonderful prasad that just was given to me. And now I didn't know then the word translation means carry across. So the gurus from India were second users of English. And whenever you're the second user of a language, you're at a disadvantage. But Sanskrit is almost a programming language. It's so precise that its meanings don't vary at all throughout time.
Yeah.
So this is very unique. So that language was now trying to make it into this very sloppy, new, mostly object-oriented language called English. And so I've been in this process ever since.
I like that. I know that you must have been talking to a lot of engineers because you're using terms which they can relate to object oriented. But I think it's absolutely accurate. I think it's really, there's this inner world which belongs inside of Sanskrit, which doesn't often translate very well in some of the Western languages. So I get that. What did you find was the impact? What in your, so you know, you've been at that sort of unique position of dwelling in, you know, looking at what worked and what hasn't worked in terms of the translations. What's been the impact of the inaccuracies that you know, we've seen in the translations to date with regards to specifically the Bhagavad Gita?
Well, at first I could see that certain words were really being problematic. The more obvious one is Dharma and religion, which everyone confuses. Religion actually, if you look it up in an etymological dictionary, so here's what we need to know. There's two kinds of dictionaries, usage and etymological. Etymology is called in Sanskrit nirukta, and it's one of the Veda angas. It's one of the 6 sciences that carry the Vedas throughout time, which are grammar, phonetics, etymology, rituals, Jyotish. And so these sciences are necessary for the large library of Vedic knowledge to move throughout time. So they're called the limbs of the Veda, just like we can't walk around without our limbs. So this nirukta, or etymology, is little known in English because English is such a sloppy language that nobody asks about the origin of the words. They use the words as if they all represent just objects. So English is fine for objects. In fact, it's got a huge vocabulary of object words taken from anywhere. The difficulty in learning it is it's very unruly. But those object words, pen, if I say la pluma in Spanish and pen in English, no one really cares. They're not really confused. But so the linguists call that a skinny word, because a skinny word is really straightforward. Doesn't have a lot of extra meaning. But if I say I love you, the linguists call that a fat word. That's full of meaning. I love pizza, I love my dog, I love you, I love this, I love that. But where did that word come from? So when you ask where words came from, that's etymology. What is their original meaning? So I was in for a big surprise because when I started this journey, I didn't know where I was going to end up. But all the languages that are spoken in the modern world that are most prevalent come from Sanskrit. Every single one. Russian is 60% Sanskrit. Latvian, Lithuanian, all of those the same. Polish, they have 50%. German is rooted in Sanskrit, but
even
so is Latin. Yes, even grammatically.
Almost transportable, like to like, in terms of how the grammar gets structured in German.
And then Latin and Greek and Aramaic directly from Sanskrit, indirectly Phoenician and Hebrew. The Hebrew alphabet's from the Phoenician alphabet, and both of those are. And of course, the Middle Eastern languages are deeply, deeply connected. And so, as it turns out, I found out that 5,000 years ago, India was a flourishing culture. That's when the last avatar came. And a huge body of knowledge was written down by the yogis then so they wouldn't lose it. It was previously oral, and they said, we're in trouble. The world's changing. It's going to get difficult. We better write all this down. So nobody knows this about India, but India's whole library of knowledge was written down. The process started 5,000 years ago. So when I learned all of this, then I started seeing that, well, then, first, nobody knows that they're all speaking Sanskrit. It's just sloppy Sanskrit. So if you think of it that way, the whole world is just speaking sloppy Sanskrit, but they've forgotten. History has disrupted the line of remembrance of where their language came from.
Yes, and what happens also, you know, in terms of regional accents and regional speak, that words get distorted, sounds get distorted, the same things are said differently. I mean, you just have to travel around India or travel around Britain even, just to hear the same language spoken differently. And I think what's happened often now, as I think, I mentioned when we were speaking that my first language was Gujarati, and then Hindi, and then English. In fact, Hindi was my fifth language. English was my second language. And then there were other things that I learned in school. Hindi was kind of like way part, there was French and German, and then Hindi. And what I realized over that listening to people, and I'm learning Dutch, and of course Sanskrit is an ongoing study. What happens is that I hear sounds and I hear words which I kind of recognize. What did you just say? And it's really fascinating to make the connection between something that I've heard in the East, in India, and then or in Hindi or Gujarati or Sanskrit, and then have it said in a very different way according to the local dialect or the local accent. So it's really interesting that happens.
Let me give you a tangible example. So let's do a little game. So basically in Sanskrit, there are two kinds of gurus, meaning someone who's teaching you. And you probably know the two words that represent those two kinds of gurus. Would you like to take a shot at it? Two kinds of gurus. Somebody's just your teacher and somebody's your guru. What do you call it in Sanskrit?
Acharya and...
It's one of them, right? Could be that. But Acharya is way high up in a lineage and they're able to represent it all correctly. So those two are called Siksha.
Yeah.
Siksha means when Siksha. You're just teaching me, but we don't have a long-term relationship. It's just a relationship of learning and student for the moment. So that moment is called Siksha. The word Sikh comes from that. The Sikhs are all Sikshas.
Seekers, yes, to seek, to look for, for yourself. I mean, nowadays we use the word in terms of being a seeker. It specifically implies we're looking for something from within. We're looking to, find a higher aspect of ourselves or a more authentic or something. So that's really interesting.
So now, that's the second word is Diksha. Okay. Now, what do we call the place where we go to get the true meaning of words?
Dictionary.
Dictionary.
Yeah.
It's directly from the Sanskrit. Digit, this finger, diksha, dictionary. So dictionary is direct Sanskrit in English. Now, if somebody has read the dictionary, they have a very large what?
Knowledge.
Vocabulary.
Or vocabulary, okay.
And that's Vach, and that's the name for Saraswati. The
Vach's word.
Vach. And so when you speak, when you do Vach, then what comes out is also called Katha, right?
Story, yeah.
Story. So when a pope speaks from the seat in Rome, it's called ex cathedra.
Wow.
This pope is using the Sanskrit word to say what he's doing. So this means that Sanskrit is now scattered like archaeological ruins all throughout the world. Now, there's a story about this in the Hebrew scriptures, and it's about a time when all the humans were trying to build a very tall building that would take them to the highest paradise without having to have qualification. They just wanted to go there mechanically. And the Supreme Being looked down and said, well, that's not fair. And so that story says the Supreme Being then messed up their languages and gave them all different languages. And then they couldn't cooperate. It's called the Tower of Babel. The Tower of Babel. So we are living in the midst of the Tower of Babel. The world, this story, whatever it came from, is a great story. It's the world we live in. We don't like each other. We think we're all different. We don't see each other in divine ways. We fight with each other. We're spending most of our time having wars instead of fun. We're not interested in each other. We don't like each other. We speak different languages. But the uniting principle, I found out, is Sanskrit. The language they spoke before the Babel started was Sanskrit. And this is the legacy of Bharat. Bharat has kept that language pure And so they have the original meanings of thousands of terms that are not just objects. They're fat words like dharma and religion. So let's go back to religion. So religion is from Latin. It's re ligare, which means ligaments. Ligaments comes from ligare, and so does legal. So it means bound by a book of rules. A religion is an organized attempt to control people by a book of rules. If you have a book, so the three religions, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, call themselves, the so-called Abrahamics call themselves people of a book. So then I've made a saying, well then, Bharat is the people of a library. So that's called a Dharma culture. Now we need to ask, if religare means a book of rules, what does Dharma mean?
That's a question that I've got coming up, funny enough, next, because I really want to talk about exactly what Dharma means. And it has multiple meanings, but these days in the Western culture, we get a lot of New Age thought coming out where they use the word Dharma, or you know, people who are studying yoga and all sorts of yogis out there, of which I'm one of them, you know, where the word Dharma gets to be used a lot. And it gets translated typically as life purpose and as you know, as purpose. But I know I'd really like to hear what you have to say about the actual meaning of Dharma.
Well, if this doesn't get too academic for everyone, each word in Sanskrit has a root. This is the etymology. So etymology means tracing a word back to its root. If you don't do that, then it has a sloppy meaning and not a precise one. But if you trace it back to its root, then you start from there and move forward, because the word's going to expand out to have many meanings. So before I tell you the Sanskrit meaning, let me tell you an interesting way it came into English. That the word dri, the D-H-R-I, easily becomes T-R-I or T-R-E-E.
Tree.
So
Life.
the word dri moved into the Anglo-Saxon environment and produced, even before then, the Celtic environment, and the effect was the tree was named after the word dri. Now, if we know what dri means the essential nature of a thing, which if you take it away, it is no longer itself. So it's the thing, it's the essence that makes something what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Water is liquid. If you take liquid from water, it's not water. Earth is solid. If you take solid from earth, it's not earth. So it's based on the Sanskrit ri, R-I, it's not an I, but it's a special character, ri, which means the laws of nature. So the laws of nature are the rhythm.
Rhythm.
It gives us the word rhythm, rhyme, arithmetic, reading. The re of all of those is adherence to this law of the very essence of something comes from the group of laws of nature that constitute it. It's all very precise. So the constituting laws are the ri or the rhythm. Then from that comes dri, the essential nature of a particular thing. And then that determines its dharma. So for tree, the next thing is, if you are an essence of something, if you don't stand for it, then there's no meaning to it. So doing your dharma is standing for your essence. So a tree is standing for its essence. So therefore, in English, that word tree gave us the word triuth and troth and truth. So the English word truth is from the Sanskrit dri, the Sanskrit word dharma.
My God, I am so blown away by your explanation of this. I tell you, Dharma is indeed, whichever way you translate it, it comes down to what you just said, which is standing for your essence, making a stand for something, which is what the tree does. It roots itself into the ground. and then standing for your essence, your individual essence, whatever that might be, and making that an expression, making your life be an expression of that, right?
And we call such a person the pillar of the community.
Wow.
Because they're stamba, they're standing. The word stand comes from the Sanskrit stamba, or pillar.
Yes.
Yes, or something which is upright. And so the uprightness comes from doing your duty, comes from your dri, but the duties are all downstream.
Mm-hmm.
They're not the essence of the word, they're how it's played out in various, their codes of conduct. And every occupation has different dharmas. So what's always true is called what? Sanatan Dharma.
Sanatan, yeah.
Always true. And what's true just for your particular self is your sva dharma, one's own sva. One's own dharma comes from the particular nature of the vehicle that they're in. So your occupation is called your sva dharma. Now this destroys the idea of caste, because a culture that knew this would never put people in an occupation by birth, except when they got degraded. But originally, education was to bring out the qualities in you that are your sva dharma. So if you were a warrior, you were trained as one. But you had to be warrior material in order to be trained as one and function as one. So then that became your sva dharma, your occupation.
Very interesting.
And the rules of your occupation, and they were the rules, codes of your sva dharma. If you're a policeman and you go out on the street, there are rules governing your behavior. So the general occupation would be called kshatriya, a protector, not the caste. It's not a caste. It's a work group. It's a jati. It's a place where you're working in a particular way. So all of this vocabulary was purposely messed up by the British.
Yeah, I tell you, I'm sorry to interrupt you on this one, but you'd mentioned the word jat. And in our languages, we do indeed refer to, if you want to find out which caste somebody is, because the word that here is a classic example of a mistranslation. So we would say, which jat are you? And jat really means, it's I don't even know. Again, I'm struggling to translate it directly because there's just no translation. And caste is so badly maligned in terms of
caste is not a Sanskrit word. Caste is a Portuguese word, and it means power by birth. It doesn't mean it has nothing to do with what you do. It means power inherited by birth. So the whole world right now is a caste system because they give their money to their children. That is a caste system. India didn't invent caste system, the British did.
Yeah.
The British have lords, and only the eldest son of the lord can inherit the property. Only in the last 10 years did the elder daughter now be able to inherit it. That's completely against the original British caste system, which was landlords. And those landlords were in charge of the peasants. And lord and lady mean the one who makes bread and the one who distributes the bread to the peasants who live on the land that's not owned by them. That is a caste system.
Yeah.
But Bharat didn't really have a caste system at first. It had a Varna system where you find out, are you a warrior? I made up words for these. Are you a professor, a protector, a producer, or a provider? That's Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra. They're not castes. They're categories of work. Because the Rig Veda says there's a head to the body, there's arms to the body, there's the belly to the body, and there's legs to the body. Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra. So whatever function you do, it isn't your caste, because you can't do it well if you just inherited it from birth, but you don't have ability. So first you have to have ability, and this is where astrology comes in. It describes your inner characteristics. So Jyotish describes your inner characteristics. So what the Brahmins used to try to do when a child was born was understand their inner nature. their dri, their essence. And then they said to the teachers, keep your eyes open and watch how this person develops. They might just be a warrior. Keep an eye on it. And they would look and see. So this whole culture has been misunderstood.
And you know, I think it's one of those cultures when you mentioned Indian astrology just now, Vedic astrology, and it's such a vast and deep thing, you know, whereas in the West, most people understand it to be like the thing that you read a line, you know, like a forecast. But I want to stick to that conversation about Dharma, because I think, you know, whether you look at the Shastras, or, you know, of which obviously Vedic astrology, Jyotish would be one limb. I would say, you know, from what I understand and what I've studied, probably the Indian culture and its teachings through the Shastras, it perhaps gives us the most access to being able to understand our inner self and our own dharma as to what am I really here to do. And I'd like you to talk about that a little bit more, because so many people struggle to realize, you know, their inner essence, like, what am I here to express? What am I here to actually do as karma? You know, how would you go about asking somebody or teaching somebody to begin to unravel and to understand this aspect of their life in terms of dharma? What is their innate dharma?